Hello and welcome to Chapter 2, Securing Network Devices. Tonight we're going to learn about how to secure routers and switches and all the different utilities that you can use to protect your devices from attacks. So let's get started. We have about 5 sections to really go over. Um, and there's a lot of commands that you really need to practice also on, and we'll do that, of course, in the labs. So securing the edge router itself, one of the first things that you want to make sure you can do is there's 3 different ways of securing your router approaches, the design itself. You can have a router that connects to your LAN directly to your outside world, and your router can really be your firewall and IPS and whatever you want. But if the router is going to do routing and you're going to do a DHCP server and it's going to do, it can also, I'm sorry, whoops, and it can authenticate users. So it's probably going to be, that might create a lot of delay. So it's probably a good idea to use maybe a firewall. This is another way of doing it where you can have a firewall right between 2 routers. So data coming from the internet will go through router 1, filtered, then it goes through the firewall to make sure they are permitted to go into your network, and then the router 2 will route you to your final destination. Or if you are a company where you have, for example, an e-commerce server, you want to put it outside your local area network so as that anybody that comes in from the outside go to a demilitarized zone area for authentication and accessing your e-commerce server. You do not want them to go right into your LAN to do your e-commerce whatever that they want to do, because if they get into your LAN, they may attack your private servers and such. So this is another approach where you have 2 routers, a firewall, and all the public servers would be placed in the demilitarized zone. So if anything happens, it happens outside your private LAN. Okay, the 3 areas of router security that you need to worry about: the physical security, number one. So this is the first thing I want you to write down. Physical security, router operating system configuration file security, and router hardening. What does each one of these mean? Physical security, you want to make sure that you're placing your router, your switches, your servers in a room where no one has access to, really, and make sure that that room has each HVAC, it has the air conditioning, the ventilations, alarms if there's anything that goes wrong in terms of environmental um, problems that you may have, humidity too high, the temperature got too high, and so on. Router operating system configuration file security. You got to make sure you have the latest router operating system installed on your device, and you got to make sure that you have a lot of memory just in case of you know, to really trying to prevent denial of service attacks as well. And of course, we'll talk about how to back up the router operating system and the configuration file within the router itself, not only having backing them up on a TFTP server like we've done in the past. Router hardening means making sure that you have the latest and the greatest updates that you have on your router. All right, so make sure you write these 3 areas of router security. That's one thing that you need you to submit for homework. All right, so let's talk about securing the administrative access, limiting the access to the device itself on how to configure the router or the switch, of course, in this case. Okay, so for the very first time, when you have a device such as a router and you need to connect to it, you have to connect to it through the console port or the auxiliary port if you have a modem on your PC. So you use the console port if you go when you go through the 9-pin serial port on the back of your PC. You go through the auxiliary port on the router if you have the modem in this case. All right, so most likely we'll go through, as we've done in our labs, we'll go through the console port. We'll connect through either the USB or the 9-pin serial port, and then we'll use either PuTTY or any other terminal emulation software to access the router. Okay. All right. So you can also use a dedicated management, but we're not do that. So let's actually get to it. One of the first thing you need to do when you are creating passwords, either for logging in through the console port or the auxiliary port or the telnetting, remote access, the password has to have a minimum of 10 characters at least. These are the guidelines. You got to make sure you mix them up, with the complexity rule, uppercase, lowercase letters, have some numbers in there. All right. And of course, as it says right here, um, deliberately misspelled words if you can, because that's sometimes for me, it's a pain. It takes a little bit longer, but it makes it harder. So the whole idea is to make sure you don't have a common or the dictionary word that you are typing in. And periodically you want to change your password because if you don't, all you're doing is you're giving enough time for somebody to using brute force to guess your password. And don't write your password down on your, anywhere on your computer, on your mobile phone, or maybe write it down and put it in your desk. That's probably not a good idea to do. All right. So as long as you stick with these guidelines and tell the users that they have to adhere to these strong password guidelines, then you should be okay. All right. So here's what you could do. I want you to write the following commands, and then next to them, I want you to explain what these are for. Here's number one command that you need to do. All of these are from the config mode. Security passwords minimum min dash length 10. What does that mean? Put right next to it after you write that down, the command. That means all password, no matter what type of password you type, has to have a minimum of 10 characters. Service password dash encryption. I want you to write that down as well. What does that mean? That means all the passwords will be encrypted when you type in the configuration file. So when you type show config, all the passwords, including the VTY password and the console password, will be encrypted. All right. The other commands, exec 330, exec timeout, which means if you type in a line VTY 0 to 4, exec timeout 3 space 30, which means if there is no um, if there is no activity within 30 minutes and 30 seconds, the session of the VTY will be disabled. So if you walk away from a Telnet session after 3 minutes and 30 seconds, you will be logged out. That's what this command means. All right. Here's what the service password encryption will do when you type show run, by the way. All right. So more commands coming up. Um, let's see here. All right. Here's another command that I want you to write. Whoops. Sorry. Username Bob, algorithm type script secret 54321. So this is to use Bob from now on. When you're telnetting or you're doing going through the console port, instead of just typing a password when you get in, now it's going to ask you what's your username. You type in Bob, and then you type in it's going to come up and say what's your password, and you're going to type in Cisco 54321. And this is what this command do. You're going to use the script algorithm to encrypt this password. That's what this algorithm dash type script means. If you do not type this, they will use the MD5 encryption to encrypt this. So this is just you're choosing a different, that's the default, the MD5. If you don't type in algorithm dash type script. All right, so I want you to type this. This creates a username and a password on your router in your database. Then you go to the console port and then you can say no password. So that means no password is set. You want the login to be local, which means you're asking the router to use the username and a password that is locally for authentication. So what that means is if you're trying to go in through the console port, it's going to prompt you for the a username. You're going to have to type in Bob, and then it will prompt you for a password. Then you're going to have to type in Cisco 5321. All right, so this is how you would set up the line console, the line auxiliary, and the line VTY. All of them, they will all need to use a username and a password. So write this down for line access. All right. If you have any questions, by the way, please bring them into class. All right. So this is important. By the way, if you just type in no password and you do not write login local and you just write login and without the word local, what you did is you really closed um, the line, and therefore no one will be able to have access because there's no password set up and there's no authentication set up. The word transport input SSH, meaning you can only SSH to this router 1. You can't use telnet. You can't type telnet, whatever. All right. If you don't write transport input SSH, that means users can SSH or telnet into your router. All right. Moving on. Excuse me for 1 second. You want to be able to set up also a login process. So you need, you need to set up a banner, either a message of the day banner or a login banner, and you type in whatever you want to write in for the banner. For example, usually we write authorized users only. This is something that you want to make sure that everyone that tried to get access into your switch or router, they have a banner that they know that this is only for authorized users and not everyone else. Okay. All right, we'll set that also up for our router. Let's look at some login enhancement features, which is really something you will go directly to. Oops, nope, we're not going to go directly to it. So let's talk about going back a little bit. Okay, here we go. So I want you to write these down too. I want you to write this command too. Login block for 120 attempts, 5 within 60. So what we want is you're saying to the router 1, I want you to block for if somebody trying to attempt, try to guess the password 5 times and he got it wrong within 120 seconds. I'm sorry, if somebody's trying to, if somebody gets the passwords wrong 5 times within 1 minute, 60 seconds, I want you to block it, not even allow him to log in for 120 seconds, for 2 minutes. So if you get the password wrong 5 times within 1 minute, you're going to be locked out for 2 minutes. That's what this means. Okay? So do that. Write that down and write the explanation so you'll know exactly what that means. Now, what happens if somebody got like that? Because you can increase this block for hours if you want to. So, and if you are the administrator, you want to get in there and still do some work because everybody else will be blocked. So what you want to do is you want to say login quiet mode, which means during the block, I want the access list, this access list, whoever permitted in this access list, to be able to get it, to be able to log in. So the login quiet mode access class permit admin allows these people 192, 168, 1010, and 1110 to have access to the router to log in during the block. All right, in the quiet mode. Login delay means you have to wait for 3 seconds for delays between the logins. All right, and also I want you to write down the login on success log and the login on failure log, which means anytime somebody logs in successfully, put it in the Syslog server, you write it down, and any failures, you also want to write that down as well. All right, how do you configure SSH? That's also very important. So how do you set SSH on the router? Because SSH allows you to send all the information from the device, from the sender to the receiver to the router, all encrypted, including the password. You don't want to use Telnet because Telnet, the password and all the information that is being traverses the network is all in clear text. All right, so secured shell. The first thing that you want to do is you type IP domain dash name and you just give it a domain name. Cisco.com, XYZ.com, or whatever you want. Then you need to generate the key. Then you type in the command crypto key generate RSA, and you can set how big the key is. General dash keys modules 1024. If you don't write general keys modules 1024, it's going to ask you. So if you just type in crypto key generate RSA and hit enter, it's going to ask you how big your key you want it to be. The bigger the key, the more time it's going to take to generate. And look how big it can be. So make sure you're writing this down. The commands really is what I want, an explanation what each command really is done for. So crypto key generate RSA general keys modules 1024 generates the public and the private keys, which we'll discuss later on what they are and how they work. All right. Then you can, this is really optional, IPSSH version 2, because everyone is running version 2. So if you don't write this down, really, it don't matter. Most likely you're gonna, all the routers are running that has better features, the version 2 than the old version 1. All right, so after you type in the IP domain, the crypto key generate, you create the username and a password like we've talked about earlier. And then you go to the line VTY 0 to 4, the 5 sessions that you can remotely access your router. Then you say login local, which means you are going to use the username and password to get in. And then you're going to type in the command transport input SSH, which means you are going to only be able to use SSH. If you try to telnet into the router, you're going to be blocked out. All right, so the commands is IP domain name, crypto key, set up a username. All of these are in the config, the first 3 commands. And then after you get in there, after you get into the line VTY, say login local, and make sure that you tell the router only to use SSH. All right. You can actually see your public key, by the way, by typing show my pub key, and this is what really shows up. See, show crypto key, my pub key RSA. This is all in hexadecimal. It's a huge number. The private key you will never be able to see, by the way. Crypto key 0 size RSA means it's going to remove all the keys that are generated and held by the router. Clean it up. It's probably a good idea to do this, crypto key 0 size RSA, before you set up a new SSH configuration. All right, you can use the show IP SSH to verify SSH connecting. All right. So moving on, let's look at the administrative rule and privileges. So let's say you have a big company and you have a lot of junior administrators that they want to use. So you can actually give users privileges levels 1 to 15 to be able to give them access to certain commands on the router. So for example, here's an example that I want you to write. Privilege exec level 5 using the ping command. So whoever has ping, so what you did, you said level 5 people can use ping command and all the parameters with the ping command. So if I type enable algorithm as script secret level 5 Cisco 5, so enable secret Cisco 5. So it had this level 5 has the password Cisco 5. We're just using the S script to do that, to encrypt the Cisco 5. So the username support privilege 5 algorithm type S script secret password. So what we're going to do from now on, when this guy support, when his name support comes in, and you type in support and you type in the password Cisco 5, he's going to have level 5 and he'll be able to use the ping command. In this case, so type in this command. This guy, privilege exec level 10 reload. So this guy at level 10. So this junior admin has level 10, and he'll be able to use the reload command. But he'll also be able to use the ping command because level 10 is higher than level 5. Is that clear? And the admin has level 15, so he'll be able to use whatever commands that were included in level 10 and in level 5. The higher the level, you inherit all the utilities and the commands in the lower levels. Okay? All right, moving on. Oh, by the way. Oh, well, we discussed that already. Okay, good. So let's move on. Let's look at role-based. It's probably a good idea to give them role-based access by giving them, for example, put a whole bunch of different commands um, in a role and just say, okay, you're a support role and whatever is in the commands in that role, you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to do these commands. So everybody will have a different role. And the way to do that is you create views. And here's how you would set up a view. So let's go directly to the commands. Actually, it did not do that. So let's go back. I'm going to show you how to set up the views. I'm not going to do support view. All right, so the first thing you are going to do is you're going to do trouble. Excuse me. Is you're going to enable, and then you type enable view, and then you give it a view name. And then you say parse view, and then the view name, if you want to take a look at it. And then they give it a secret password and all the commands that are included. In fact, I have it better written right in here. I wrote it in my notes. So let me go down in my notes and show you how would you set up the view. So here we go. It's probably, and I want you to write these down. Configuring the view. So I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to blow this up a little bit more. All right, so how do you set up a view? You go in and you type AAA new dash model, and you say parse view, show view. So I'm naming a new view called show view. A password is Cisco. I said secret Cisco. And the command in the show view is the show command. So if somebody goes in, is given the show view, they'll be able to do the show commands. If somebody exit, I created another command called reboot view. So whoever has the reboot view will be able to do reload, right? You can create a super view called user, parse user super view. He has this. So if I gave the user and he knows this password Cisco 2, he'll be, and I included the show view in the reboot. So this user is able to do all the commands in the show view and all the commands in the reboot view. By the way, you can also type in the show and a whole bunch of other commands if you want, and reload and a whole bunch of other commands if you want. All right. So this is how you would create a regular views, and a super view is the one that includes all the other views that are created. So you can actually assign these to junior administrators, or one big manager has maybe a super view. All right, so views are a little bit easier to use than privileges, I find. I don't know if that's completely true. But remember, by the way, you have to do the AAA new dash model before you create any of the views. You can't just create them immediately. All right, moving on. Okay, so we'll take a look at that. Let's take a look at the image and configuration file. The resilient configuration file. So when the configuration file in the primary boot set is a copy of the running configuration file that was in the router when the feature was first enabled. So what you want to do is we want to make sure that that we can copy and make another copy of the operating system and another copy of the configuration file and saves them on the router, so that if somebody by mistake deleted the operating system that we always boot from, or it got corrupted, you'll be able to reload the operating system within seconds. We'll see if how to do that. So you don't even have to go outside and copy it. And the same thing with the configuration file. So the resilient configuration feature allows you to make copies of the operating system and the configuration file on the router itself. So in case any of them got corrupted, you'll be able to reload them immediately. You don't have to copy them and put them on a flash drive or on a TFTP server. All right, so how do we do that? All you got to do, write these commands down. Secured space boot dash image, that will make a copy of the operating system. And the other command is secure, where is it? This is to restore the boot set. Excuse me. Secure boot dash config, that will make a copy of the running configuration file. By the way, you can always keep typing secure boot dash config, and we'll always update the configuration file if you made any changes to it. If you type show boot security boot set, secure boot set, you'll be able to see the in the configuration file the new operating system that is being copied. If you type, you will not be able to see the configuration file if you type dir, because you'll not be going to be able to. It doesn't show up in the configuration file. It's hidden. So this way you won't be able to delete it. All right, so let's say you want to reload and your operating system is all screwed up. You can say directly flash. You can see this operating system that is in there. And you can just say boot flash 0. That's in the flash. And then you type in the operating system and you're reloaded and you're all good to go. All right, if you want to restore the configuration file, and then all you got to do is copy, flash the rescue one that you did, and you're into the running config to get them back. All right, so please write these commands down, and of course an explanation next to them of how you do them. All right, you can use the secure copy command too. I don't use that as much. Password recovery. All right. Password recovery, we're gonna do that hopefully in the lab, because if you bought a router that has a password in it, you have to be able to reset it. So these are the steps on. Please write these 14 steps down. I know it's a pain, but I want you to, while you're writing each one of them, think about that you are in front of the router and you're doing it. We are going to practice this. I think we did this in one of our previous classes. I think maybe in 205 or 207. But if you're not sure, we're going to do this. We could actually practice this also on Packet Tracer as well. But these are the commands to reset a password. All right. Anyway, please remind me in class. If I have not done it, or if you're not sure on how to do it, we'll do it together. All right, so how to reset a password. That's very important. And by the way, resetting a password on a router, this is only for a router, is different than resetting a password on a switch to do different setup. And by the way, you can Google any of these. They're all out there. So if you ever went to eBay and you bought a router that has a password in it and you can't use it, you just use this guideline, the step-by-step, and you'll be able to reset your password and you'll be ready, good to go. All right, password recovery. Now the problem with setting up a password, by the way, anybody can do it. So anybody can get into your router and reset the password and delete everything for you. So what you really want to do after you're all done, your configuration, is you want to say no service password recovery. All right, so I want you to write this down. No service password recovery. What that does is it will disable the password recovery and you won't be able to do those 14 steps. So if somebody got into your router, won't be able to recover your password or reset password. But the problem is, what happens if you forgot your password? Well, unfortunately, you're going to be screwed then. You're going to make sure if you're going to type no service password recovery, you got to make sure that you know what your password is. If worst case scenario, you forgot your password and that you do have the no password service recovery, you're going to have to, you know, do the first couple of steps, control break within 5 seconds, and then you will delete everything. The configuration file will be completely deleted. That means you'll lose all your configuration um, if you do that. So if you make sure that if you're going to type no service password recovery, that you write down the password and put it someplace where no one has access to it, or just tell it to the upper management because it's very important. And you probably want to do that. And by the way, people will be able to do that only if they have physical access. You have to have physical access to the router to be able to do the password recovery. That's why in the beginning of this lecture, I said you want to make sure your physical router is in a place where no one has access to it. All right, so let's take a look at the management access, the inbound and the outbound. Okay, not that important. Moving on, Syslog servers. This is where you have like the event viewer in your PC where you type in anything that happens on the router, logging in. You want to put that, all that information has to be written down someplace to make sure we know what happened, all the events that happened to the router, because we can actually look at if there's any attacks, if there's any problems that happened on the network. We can always go into the Syslog server and find out what's going on. And the Syslog server can actually come down and tell us all that information. So for example, when you type no shutdown, that information will be sent to the Syslog server and it'll be logged in. Any event that happens on the router or any of these information can be sent to the Syslog server, excuse me. All right, so the Syslog messages that can be sent or set alerts, they have 8 different levels. And please, believe it or not, if and when you take the CCNA security, when I took it, they were asked me questions about these levels. So please write down these levels from 0 to 7 and what the keywords are. And you got to remember them if you are going to take the test. So write down the 8 levels and what the keywords are. And or you can, by the way, when you are setting up your Syslog server, you can write the keyword or the level number if you want. Preferable, it really doesn't matter. If you remember the keywords and remember that emergency has the highest level and the lowest level is just for debugging. It could be information that you want to send. So you set the level to tell the Syslog server which information you want to store, right? I want it to be set up. So here's a typical message that is in the Syslog server. It gives you the time, right? The message sequence numbers. Actually, it's not the time. And all the information that is from 1 to 5. You can read this if you want to. That's if you go into read the Syslog server, you can tell exactly each event in the Syslog server and what happened and what it means. For example, in this case, the interface changed to up the serial 000. So how do we set up the Syslog server? So if you have the Syslog server right here, the 10226, and we want to set up the router 1, and the interface G0 is the one that's facing the 10226 Syslog server. So R1 is going to be sending all the events to this Syslog server 10226, right? So what you need to do, oops, you type in the login host. You give it a name or the IP address, which is the Syslog server 10226. Login trap level, maybe level 7 or level 2 or level 0 if it's emergency, informational, level 6, right? And then the login interface, that's the G01. G01 is the one that's facing the Syslog server. And logging on means making sure that they're active, send the information out. Okay, if you don't put logging on, that means none of the information. This is just to configure where the information is going to be set, and this is just turns it on, activate the logging, sending the information out when those events happen. The SNMP network is another way of setting up the simple network management protocol that helps you view the traffic on the network, and you can get a lot of information to manage your network in terms of traffic. If you want for expansion, you can specifically diagnose the network if it has any problems, bottleneckings, and things like that. The only thing that I can tell you when it comes to SNMP is to make sure that you're using version 3. That's very important. And it has encrypted data. It's the authentication. It uses MD5 or SSH or SHA. So it's very, very strong. Don't use anything below version 3. And you can set up the traps and vulnerabilities. I really don't use it as much because version 3 really uses the encrypted tunneling when you're sending and passing information. If you use anything below version 3, like version 2 or even worse, version 1, all the data that's being sent and back and forth is in clear text, and that might be an issue. All right. So I want for SNMP3, what I want you to write these 3 sentences. Oops. Whoop. Yeah, right here. Okay. Although I don't use it as much, like I said earlier, but here are the commands to set up version 3. If you want to write these down, that's really up to you. Okay, moving on. Here's a typical example of setting up the SNMP server. Excuse me. Okay, now the time protocol, the network timing protocol, that's easy to set up. So what you need to do with an NTP, the network time protocol, is that if you have a router, you want to make sure all the routers and switches and everybody is synchronized in terms of the timing when they're sending updates to each other. Okay, so you'll have a master router that's going to tell all the other routers, you guys going to take my time, and this I'm going to have the timer, and everybody's going to synchronize with me. I am the master timer. So make sure that everybody is in sync. So first of all, you go to the router and make sure you set the clock, the one that's going to be the master. All right, so you go to router 1. I want you to write this down after you write in the time, and you say NTP master 1. So that means he is the master that has the clock, right? And you can type show clock if you want to make sure to verify that the clock is okay. Then you go to router 2 and you say NTP server 10.10.10.1. So router 2 now knows that the NTP server is this guy. That's pretty much it, really. Okay, that's how you set up router server, the master, and the host. You can set up authentication between them. So you can type in the NTP Authenticate and type in the MD5 Cisco and a trusted key to make sure that they pass a password when they synchronize, because you don't want any rogue router to come in and synchronize with the master without being authenticated, right? So everybody has to authenticate now. We do that on both sides, by the way. All right, the automated security features such as LLDP and CDB, the Cisco Discovery Protocol, and the LLDP, the Link Local Discovery Protocol. This is the Cisco one. These commands is really used to send out information and to gather information, to send out data, to solicit information from neighboring devices. You'll get, for example, who the if it's a router or a switch that you are directly connected to, and what the IP address. Is it a router? Is it a switch? The problem with CDP and LLDP is they are used extensively by attackers to do reconnaissance attack, to find out who am I connected to and what their IP address. So even these are just to make things life a little bit easier. These utilities are enabled by default on your operating system. So probably a good idea, and even Cisco recommends that you disable the CDP and the LLDP if if you have no use for them. All right. So this is LDTP run. Remember, you type in the run command. if you are on the interface, the enable command, CDP enable, or CDB or LLDB run, LLDB run or CDP run, you do it on the config mode. That's for all the interfaces. And if you go to a specific interface and you want to, then you type in INT, let's say FA01, and then you can do CDP or LLDP enable. You use the word enable instead of run. That usually comes up on the exam, but it's probably a good idea to disable them, as it says right here. Um, Disable all unnecessary services, restrict commonly configured management services, disable probes and scans, disable gratitudes and proxy ARPs, and IP directly broadcasts. All right. Now, if you're not sure what to disable and what the um, defaults are utilities and you just want to secure them, the best command to use is auto-secured. So auto-secured is going to disable all unnecessary um, utilities and commands that are not being used. So when you type auto-secured, you're going to get a command, you're going to get a statement that says, are you connected to the internet? You're going to say yes, and you're going to say which interface. It's going to ask you which interface are connected to the interface. You identify that, and it will enable that interface to the internet. All other interfaces are shut down. Or you enable them when you need them. The CDP is also disabled. All the other commands are disabled that are not being used. Some features with the auto security, you can have a lot of parameters if you want to use them. But if you tap auto security, it just does the whole good, you know, everything for you. You don't have to use any of the optional features that you need. Okay, so using the auto secure command, I want you to write these 4 things for auto secure. So it gives you all these benefits, let's put it that way. All right, so write these down because I want you to remember that you can always use the auto secured command, and it's probably a powerful. That's one of the first things that you probably do if you're not sure what the default utilities are in there. But remember, there are people out there they know, and they might want to use these default utilities or commands to really penetrate your network. So you want to disable them. Auto secure will take care of that for you. And then you're going to have to enable everything by any utility that you need by default, by yourself. All right, we don't need to worry about the control panel thing. The only thing that I want you to use, if to know, the last thing is, let's say you're running OSPF between routers and you want to make sure you set up authentication. So here's how you set up authentication. And again, that's the last thing I want you to write, is how to set up authentication between 2 OSPF routers. So in other words, they will not share OSPF updates without mutual authentication, which means whatever I set up on router 1, you have to do the same thing on router 2. So you go to router 1, in this case, S000, you type in IPOSPF message digest key, MD5, Cisco 123, authentication message digest, write that down, and then you go to router 2 and you do the same thing. All right, and then that's it. You're all good to go. And now these routers will not pass updates to each other, OSPF updates, unless they pass the passwords to each other. And once they, in other words, you give me the password, I'll authenticate you. You give me the password, I'll authenticate you. And if we're all good to go, then we can pass our routing tables to each other, right? And you could use SHA between them if you want to, but you don't have to if you don't need to. You can use, this is a little bit more bigger, not bigger, more resilient type of authentication. The secured hashing algorithm, a little bit stronger than the MD5 that we talked about. So either you can use the other one that I told you to write down, or you can use this, the SHA authentication, which is a little bit stronger. Okay, that we're not really going to discuss as much, and that's it. All right. So it's a little bit of a lot of information, right? We're going to practice this in our in-class labs and at home labs. If you have any questions, please bring them in so that to clarify. All right. And please read your book. At least, at minimum, you should read the online book, go over it so that gives you a little bit more details of what we're talked about. And you should be okay. And remember, practice is what's going to make you professional. Probably a good idea is to open up a packet tracer and try a lot of these commands all of these commands that we looked at least type them in and see what you can do if you have if you have time to do that. All right, I'll see you in class. Good luck.